So welcome to today's Greater Life CoffeeCast. And the invitation with today's happiness focus for our CoffeeCast is beware the dangers of double dipping. What do I mean here? What am I talking about? Well, I've just returned from 2 days at Legoland Windsor with my family. And I think I mentioned yesterday in the CoffeeCast that one of the first experiences we had was of this incredible new ride. I think it's called Flight of the Sky Lion. And it is some kind of immersive 4D simulator, which is that they then spray you with water spray when you're going through the seas, and they put the wind in your face as well. And the first time I experienced it, it was really something incredible. And so I was surprised yesterday when we, of course, we made it our priority to get on it again, as soon as we could in the morning. And I was surprised at how the second go was. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was still a wonderful spectacle and, very impressive, but it didn't have that same kind of awe experience. And it really struck me just how much of a validation this was of the work of Stephen Kotler and Jamie Wheel in their exploration and study of flow states. And I remember doing some training with them a while back, and they laid out what they called the cycle of flow. And that, I mentioned it here before, that there is, for those of us who want to cultivate and harness flow states, which, by the way, if you're new to this CoffeeCast and you're new to the idea of flow states, they are what the Hungarian-American researcher who coined the term, they are this sense of being in the zone, of being in your flow, of being totally in the moment, and very often so in the moment that you might forget to sleep or eat because you're so absorbed in the task at hand, satisfyingly so. And in fact, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who was the Hungarian-American researcher who coined the term, who did the research into these states, he called them the optimal state of human experience. And when you listen to, extreme sports athletes talk about the importance of these states, they will very often describe them in kind of quasi-mystical terms. Now, my experiences on the ride at Legoland weren't quite that deep. However, flow occurs on a spectrum of like light flow state activities, which might be, for example, reading a book or cooking a meal, being totally absorbed in the task at hand there, through to riding a 80-foot wave on a surfboard. That's going to require a really deep level of flow state activity to be able to pull something like that off. And I would say that the kind of roller coaster / simulator ride at Legoland was perhaps in the kind of medium to low flow state category. Now, Stephen Kotler and Jamie Wheel, in their exploration and study of flow states, they identified that if we want to be in these states, and of course this is when we're talking about the pillar of happiness, well, we've already explored in the past that flow states perhaps are if they're the ultimate state or optimum state of human experience or psychology, then of course they are perhaps the happiness beyond happiness, if you like. And they identified a few interesting things in what they termed the cycle of flow. And the first, of course, it is a cycle. It's not just something we kind of switch on and off. It is that there is a process that must be gone through. And the first you could say is struggle, and that there must be something you're wrestling with. And I guess thinking about the experience of the ride at Legoland, well, perhaps the struggle phase is the queuing, right? Is the waiting in the queue, and then there begins to be a kind of release phase where things start to open out and things start to come together, and that perhaps is, in the case of the ride here, where we're waiting in the loading bay. We've got through the queue and we're waiting to enter the ride. The anticipation is heightening and we're watching the safety briefing video. And in other situations, that might be you've been wrestling with, how do I begin this chapter? And you get you finally, maybe you stare at a blank page for, an hour, but you finally get the first couple of sentences and it begins to move, it begins to come together. That's the release phase, and then we enter flow, and that's where the words start pouring out as if from a different place beyond your conscious awareness, and in this case, actually riding the ride. But then afterwards, there is a phase of recovery, and they recognise, Stephen Cotton and Jamie Wheal, that this is a really necessary phase, a necessary part of the flow cycle is recovery, is the building again into preparedness for the struggle phase. Now, the title of this CoffeeCast, and of course the invitation is, Beware the Dangers of Double Dipping. And what I'm referring to here is that many people get so blown away by the flow states, they try the next day to jump straight back into flow states without honouring and acknowledging the need for the rest, the recovery, and the struggle phase again, that there is this cycle that must be adhered to. And a great example of this as well is, for example, those who might use recreational drugs. Now, recreational drugs are like a fast track into flow states, but of course there is a danger because they are that fast track. They can just take you straight there, right? And yet, you would have, the stories from drug addicts time and again who they're chasing that high, they're chasing that first high they experienced, but they never quite got anything that would quite touch that first experience of using the substance. Okay? And so I think this is what was going on yesterday when I took the ride for the second time. Like, I was so, my expectations were so heightened, and then it was just because it was much more of a known quantity. And I think part of the flow state experience is that you are on an adventure into the unknown, whether it's an unknown in terms of what am I going to write next? What are the words that are going to flow onto the page next? Or what is this painting or this, thing I'm working on? What's it going to turn out like? That's an adventure in itself. And what is this meal that I'm cooking going to look like? Whereas if it is a known quantity, there isn't anything really to struggle with. And therefore there is nothing that can grab the focus of attention such that a flow state will be induced. So that's my CoffeeCast for today. To invite you to beware the dangers of double dipping when it comes to flow. Because as we've heard from, a self-reported survey of CEOs around the world, that, flow states result in upward of 500% greater productivity, innovation and creativity. So that is a profound amount. And therefore, it really behoves us to give this flow cycle, this flow state cycle, its due, to actually recognize that if we want to harness and leverage these flow states consistently in our lives, then it requires us to honor the process, to understand it, and to align ourselves with how it works so that we can be in the optimal state of human experience and psychology more often than not. But we must beware the dangers of double dipping. All right.